The Honourable David Parker.
Mr Chairman, I'm going to begin by qualifying my knowledge of the health system across Otago Southland. I was born in Roxburgh Hospital, which then existed, formed at the time when the power dam was built there. I was raised in Dunedin. I suffered a serious head injury when I was working on Stewart Island in the early 1980s and was flown to Invercargill Hospital, and from there to the Dunedin Hospital. And some people say that's why I joined the Labour Party, but I deny that. So I know the importance of Invercargill Hospital. I lived for a period in Queenstown in the 1980s. I was the Member of Parliament for the Otago electorate in the early thousands, and oh, thank you, Annette King. And I had a lot to do with health services in the 3 regional hospitals that were in the area that I was MP for, Oamaru, Queenstown and Dunstan Hospital near Alexandra. And while I was there, the Labour government funded the rebuild of the Dunstan Hospital. I lost that seat, and since then I have lived at least some of the time in Dunedin. Mr Speaker, I believe that there's some ironies in this bill. Members don't have to have been here very long to know that Richard Thompson, one of the commissioners, was removed by the last National Minister of Health from his post when Tony Ryle chose to blame him for the computer rot that had been outed by Richard Thompson as chair, who brought it to the attention of the authorities and caused it to be prosecuted, the individual to be prosecuted. That was the Swan fraud. And for his doing his duty as chair, he was removed as chair. Nonetheless, the then minister appointed a chair from out of the country, from out of the region, from South Canterbury from memory, to be the chair of the board, Joe Butterfield, to sort out the finances, which got worse. So not only did the minister appoint the chair, the minister appointed Crown monitors. Stuart McLaughlin, I think it was the Crown monitor who was appointed, and that Crown monitor couldn't sort it out either. I want to go to why it is that the rural population funding model, which lies behind the funding deficit that led to this appointment and the extension of this appointment, is wrong. New Zealand has forever been an outlier in the international statistics on the outcomes for rural people. Somehow we've been miraculously able to deliver health outcomes for rural populations as cheaply for rural areas as we can in city areas, despite that not being achievable anywhere else in the world. And it transpires, and that feeds through to the rural adjuster, because the rural adjuster assumes that it's not as expensive to service rural populations as it is in fact. Now, why is that? Actually, it turns out it's because the way in which New Zealand collects statistics for rural populations is different from the rest of the population and rest of the world, and it's wrong. So how does it work? Well, small towns that are in New Zealand are classified as urban despite being serviced by rural hospitals. What that does is understate the cost of servicing rural populations, because those rural townships aren't included in the statistics for rurality, and instead they appear in the city population stats, and they average down the appearance of the, I've got the other call, sir, the point of order, Mr Speaker.
Yeah,
point of order, Mr Speaker.
A point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I apologise, sir, if this hasn't been done properly, but my understanding is that the Greens aren't taking the other 5-minute call, and therefore I seek leave.
I had not picked up that you were doing both calls. In fact, I saw a signal otherwise to the deputy leader, to your deputy leader earlier. I'm going to, because I'm not sure of the rules here as to extending calls by part. I know you can pass off calls, but I'm not sure you can extend them. I think probably the easiest thing to do is I I will, because I'm not sure of the rule, seek the leave of the House for the Honourable David Parker to take a 10-minute call, being the 5-minute call that would otherwise be available in the next call to the Labor Party, as well as this one which was available to the Greens. Is there any objection to that? There appears to be none. David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I appreciate the way you handled that. Sir, so the cost of rural health is underestimated because our rural populations are included in cities, and therefore slightly averages down or hides the cost of rurality. The second point is that the rural people who live in lifestyle blocks around cities in New Zealand are counted as rural, when in actual fact they're generally wealthy people who are getting their services from cities. So that's the second reason why we have mistakes in the rural adjuster in respect of truly rural populations. So, Mr Speaker, the rural adjuster is problematic, and the consequences of that are that DHBs that service rural populations are underfunded. And there's nowhere that that problem is greater than in the southern region, Otago Southland. The second point, sir, I would make in terms of the issues that we have in the south, there's some really important decisions that the commissioners have to take. Population densities are changing across Otago. We've got strong population growth in Queenstown, Wanaka. We've got low population growth in Invercargill, Oamaru and Dunedin. It's not that high either. It's a bit higher than Invercargill and Oamaru. Now, what that means is that the difficulty there is that decisions have to be taken now as to what is the future shape of tertiary hospitals in the south. I think it's obvious that whichever way you cut the numbers, even though Queenstown is growing, Queenstown is never going to be in the foreseeable future as large as the Dunedin centre of population. And that means that the tertiary services in the south, in Otago Southland, will still need to be provided out of Dunedin. The worst of all outcomes is if we start to spread some of those specialist tertiary services to Invercargill, Alexandra, Queenstown and Dunstan, because none of them will be big enough to support quality tertiary services. We will undermine the quality of tertiary services in Dunedin, and increasingly those tertiary services will be then serviced from Christchurch, which is not in the interests of anyone in the south. So I urge the commissioners to make that decision, to give long-term direction to all of the hospitals in the south. Now, some people say you should count Wanaka and Queenstown together. You shouldn't. That's a poor form of care, because Wanaka people going first to Queenstown would be going further away from the tertiary hospital in Dunedin to which they may need to be transferred. So the best route of care goes Wanaka, Dunstan, Dunedin for those people who need it. So those decisions have to be taken. If they're not taken, the viability of not just the Dunedin hospital is threatened, and there are some terrible things have happened in Dunedin in recent years. They've lost their teaching status for things like the ICU unit. I had an eye infection about a year ago. I had to go into the eye clinic. My doctor sent me down there. The place is, I'm amazed at the quality of service that they give out of a building that is very run down and shabby. Is pressured with the number of people who now need eye services, both because of improved technology but also because of the ageing population, mean that there are a lot more people in the south needing eye interventions than used to be the case. So, Mr. Speaker, I am supportive of the extension of term. I do think that this is not going to be cured unless the rural adjuster is looked at. I also agree with the speaker from some of the other speakers that say that teaching hospitals probably aren't properly compensated either, and that is felt most pressing if you're in a small centre where you can't spread the cost of teaching over as many people, which again reflects the Dunedin problem. Mr. Speaker, underfunding because of the rural adjuster in particular, I think, is the main cause of the problems. There will, though, be a need for an update of some clinical practice in Dunedin. I think that over time, some of the specialist services out of peak times are going to have to be, it's going to have to be a slightly different model in Dunedin for the delivery of those services, including more cooperation, probably with the Canterbury DHB in respect of after-hours telephone cover for the registrars who are on out of hours. That is the way in which people in Invercargill, Queenstown, Wanaka, sorry, not Wanaka, but Queenstown, Alexandra, Dunstan and Oamaru currently get support in is through services delivered through the telephone from specialist to far. So with those comments, sir, I support this bill. I do share Claire Curran's concerns that it is bad that we have unelected representatives, but I don't think there's any avoiding that. We've got to give these commissioners time to finish the job.
Chris?